Bright QT. Every student matters.
Hello everyone. Now let's start our second topic, that is the spread of the idea of nationalism in Europe. But before starting that, let's have a brief recap of what we have learnt in our last session. So in our last session, we talked about the concept of nation and how did it emerge in Europe. Now students, in this part, what did you learn? You learned that nation is described as a community of people who belonged or who had this idea of common homeland and a feeling of shared belongingness. Now these were the key terms that we discussed earlier, right? Yes. So, apart from this common heritage or culture or historical developments. So, these were the key terms discussed in our introduction part. And we also learnt how there was this transition from the multinational dynasties to the emergence of nation state, right? Now this is how this whole idea of nationalism, it came into being. Apart from that, we also learned that French Revolution was a big clear expression for this whole idea of nationalism in Europe. When? In 19th century. So these were some of the key points that you already are aware of. Now let us understand how this idea of nationalism it spread in Europe. Now students, you would remember that we already have talked about the condition of Europe in the 18th century. We saw that there was no feeling of a common territory among the people who were living there. Instead of this, there was multinational dynasties such as the Austrian or Habsburg Empire, the Russian Empire, and so on. Now, please observe this map here. When we look at this map, we see that all these sections of Europe, the eastern section or the central Europe, they were under the autocratic monarchies. Now, what do we understand by autocratic monarchies? The term here, it means that the kings who were ruling there, they had the absolute control in that particular region and they did not see themselves as sharing a collective identity or a common culture. Now, let's observe this map again. The first number here is the Kingdom of Sardinia. The second is Republic of Venice. Then the third is Republic of Genoa and so on. Now later on in this chapter, you will learn about the unification of Italy and unification of Germany, right? That how these regions here, they unified and formed a nation. Likewise, in Germany as well. But here we have to understand that there were the separate kingdoms or provinces everywhere. Okay? Whether it's the Central Europe or the Eastern Europe. Right? But it was later on that this whole idea of nationalism came into being in the 19th century. Here we are going to take the example of Austrian Empire and we will understand how the idea of nation was not here, right? So taking the example of Austrian Empire, also known as the Habsburg Empire. Please observe this map here, students. The whole region here is the Austrian Empire and it comprised of different regions such as Austria, Hungary, Galicia, Sudetenland, Tyrol, Bohemia, Lombardy and Venetia. Yes, questions can be asked based on this, so you have to remember all the names here. Now, today you are aware of some names such as Switzerland, then you are aware of Germany, you are aware of the name France. But what we know today of these countries, were they existing at that time? No, students, they were not existing at that particular time. Look at this map carefully. What are we observing here? We see that there are different regions like the Austria region, then the Hungary region, then the region that is Galicia, the Bohemia, Lombardy, Italy and so on. And apart from this, in all these regions, people were speaking different languages. Okay? So again, they can't share a common thing among them. Living in different regions, then speaking different languages. How this whole idea of nationalism will come into being here? So, for example, in the regions of Lombardy and Venetia, somewhere here, okay, people were speaking the these were the Italy speaking regions. Then the German speaking region was this region of Bohemia. In Hungary, Magyar was a language that was spoken. This is the region here. Then in Galicia, Polish language was spoken. This is the region of Galicia, and here people spoke the Polish language and it was quite different, right? So in all these regions, people are speaking different languages, they are following different culture. So there is no common connect here. Now, are you understanding how this idea of nationalism or nation was not evident in this period? Because there was no common factor among the people who were living. There was no common defined territory, right? So therefore, the idea of nationalism was not coming here. But then certain changes or developments took place in Europe. Now you have to remember three major developments that took place here. The first one is the rise of middle class. The second one is the spread of the ideology of liberalism. And the third one is Treaty of Vienna and the new spirit of conservatism. Here what do we observe? We see that among the people or in this region, there is no political unity, right? No shared belongingness, no common homeland, no political unity. Now, these are the keywords to understand the term nation, and people, they do not find these common factors here, and therefore, there was no nation state. But with the rise of middle class, coming up of this ideology of liberalism, and finally the Treaty of Vienna that was designed in the year 1815, and the idea of conservatism, this whole new notion of nationalism, it came into being. Now, one by one, we will understand all these important reasons or the developments that took place in Europe. Before that, let's come up to the section of exercises. In your long answer type questions, you have one question. The question says, till mid-18th century, there was no nation states as exists today. Justify by giving examples. Now the question here, it carries 5 marks. So the answer should be given properly. Here I have pointed out some of the important points that you have to mention. And in this topic, we have learnt about this important point. Now when you will read and cover this topic, you will be able to answer this question. Here what we have to do? We have to talk about how multinational dynasties it existed in Europe in the before 18th century, right, or in the 18th century. So, you have to take the example of Austrian Empire, and in Austrian Empire, we just saw how different regions existed there, be it Austria, Hungary, Bohemia, Galicia and so on, and how in these respective regions different languages were spoken, right? So you have to make and you have to write all these important points here. You have to see that diverse group of people, they were living together with no sense of political unity and shared culture. Now students, let me point out, these two terms are really important. Whenever you are writing an answer, you have to talk about this common shared culture, the shared belongingness, the common history, heritage, and that there was no political unity. This is how you can write a full complete answer for the question given here. Thank you.